Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, how are you today? In this video, we are going to learn about fraction. Before we start, let me introduce myself. My name is Cica Aulia. I am from Math Education in my third year at State Islamic University Syarif Hidayatullah, Jakarta. So, let's go! What is fraction? A fraction can be a part of a whole. For example, let's see. This is a family with 5 members. There is 2 adults, mom and dad, and 3 kids. Very well. So, what fraction would reflect this data? We know that 2/5 of the group are adults. Number 5 below the line is called the denominator. It indicates that there are 5 people in the group. Number 2 above the line is called the numerator. It indicates that 2 people in the group are adults. Exactly. So, what fraction would represent the number of kids in the family? Yeah, 3/5 in this group of 5. 3 people are kids. Well done. Number in the form before are known as fraction. Okay, I have one question. The question is, Ayu will make 2 cakes. She needs 3/2 kg of flour for the first cake and 4/3 kg of flour for the second cake. How much flour does Ayu need to make the 2 cakes in total? Before we solve the question, I will tell you firstly about the definition of fraction. Fraction are the ratio of 2 integers, or any number that can be expressed in the form of a over b, where a is not a multiple of b, and b is not equal to 0. A is not equal to b. A, b are integers. Fraction can be expressed in the form a over b, where a is the numerator and b is the denominator. To solve the previous problem, we need the operation on fraction. Okay, there is addition of fraction. Addition of fraction defined by a over b plus c over d equals to a times d plus c times b over b times d. Okay, next, there is multiplication of fraction defined by a over b times c over d equals to a times c over b times d. Okay, for all this formula, b and d is not equal to 0. The rules for subtraction and division can be derived. Okay, now we're gonna solve the question before. We know from the question there is 3/2 kg of flour for the first cake, and then 4/3 kg of flour for the second cake. The question is, how much flour does Ayu need to make the 2 cakes in total? This question asks us to calculate how much flour Ayu used to make the 2 cakes. For this problem, we can using addition formula. A over B plus C over D equals to A times D plus C times B over B times D. A over B is for the first cake and C over D is for the second cake. So 3 over 2 plus 4 over 3 equals to 3 times 3 plus 4 times 2 over 2 times 3 equals to 9 plus 8 over 6 equals to 17 over 6 equals to 2 and 5 over 6. Before we simplify 17 over 6 to 2 and 5 over 6, we know that 17 is larger than 6. If the numerator larger than the denominator, we can call it as improper fraction. So, the total flour that Ayu needs is 2 and 5 over 6 kilogram. Okay, before we end this study, I have one more question for us to solve it together. The question is, in a class of 40 students, 1/5 of the total number of students like to study English. 2/5 of the total number like to study mathematics. And the remaining students like to study science. The question is, first, how many students like to study English? Second, how many students like to study mathematics? And the last question is, how many the total number of students like to study science? We know from the question, there is 40 students, 1/5 of the total number of students like to study English, and 2/5 of the total number like to study mathematics. Okay, for the first question, how many students like to study English? To calculate how many students like to study English, we can multiply the number of students in a class by the number of students who like to study English. Okay, here 40 multiplied by 1/5 equals to 8. So, the student who like study English is 8 students. Okay, for the second question, how many students like to study mathematics? Same as before, to calculate how many students like to study mathematics, we can multiply the number of students in a class by the number of students who like to study mathematics. 40 multiplied by 2/5 equals to 16. So, the student who like to study mathematics is 16 students. Okay, the last question. How many the total number of students like to study science? We know that there are 40 students in a class, and we have found that there are 8 students who like to study English, and 16 students who like to study mathematics. And then, to find how many students like to study science, we can subtract the total student in the class with the student who like study English and mathematics. So, 40 minus 8 minus 16 equals to 16. So, the student who like to study science is 16 students. Okay, that's our material today about fraction. Hope you guys can understand it. And bye-bye. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.